Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for some more Streets of New Capenna spoilers. And we are moving forward to deck number 4, the Esper deck, and this deck's pretty sweet, which means we should probably jump right into it, start talking about the spicy new cards. Before we do, 2 quick reminders. Number 1, to keep up on all the latest spoilers, you should head on over to mtgpreviews.com. Number 2, if you need some Streets of New Capenna cards, Commander or otherwise, you can get them from our awesome sponsor, Card Kingdom, by heading over to cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish, and even get a free goldfish sticker. Just let them know you want one in your order notes, and they will hook you up. Anyway, let's talk Esper from Streets of New Capenna Commander. So the Esper deck, led by Capenna's Obscura Confluence, which we're not going to get into again, click the card, check out the old video where we talked about the face commander, is an interesting take on Esper. It's kind of Esper graveyard tempo built around the connive mechanic, and we got 2 backup commanders in the deck, starting with Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer, which is kind of a legendary containment construct, 5 mana, but it costs 1 less to cast for each different mana value among cards in your graveyard, so could potentially be 2 mana, and that'll help you pay for the command text later in the game. And then whenever you discard a non-land card, you can cast it from your graveyard. So first off, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this should get around the timing restriction of cards. So if you, let's say, discard a creature with Jace Vryn's Prodigy during your opponent's turn, I believe that you can still cast it the way this is worded. If I'm wrong, correct me and I'll make a note of it. But I think that the easiest way to build around Oscar is just play a bunch of looting effects, windfalls and dark deals and Jace Vryn's Prodigies. Anything that's drawing and discarding cards is going to essentially double up because you can cast the cards that you discard with Oscar. There's also some other possibilities though. Works really well with Skirk Familiar. Skirk Familiar lets you discard a card to make a black mana. The downside is you're discarding the cards. You're losing cards to do this. However, with Oscar, you're not actually losing cards. You can discard a card and then you just take and get it back, essentially cast it from your graveyard. So it's giving your spells a 1 mana discount. It's like having a Burgie on the battlefield. Could also embrace the graveyard aspect, like Desecrated Tomb cares about creatures leaving your graveyard. So you can discard a creature, it goes to your graveyard, cast it with Oscar, so you still get the creature, not losing it, and get a bat for your trouble. Also seems like a sweet demure take on a Madness commander, even though it doesn't specifically care about Madness. Madness decks want to be discarding cards, so it kind of naturally fits. You can throw in some Darren, probably an actual Madness cards, and it sort of just gives everything Madness in its own weird way. So if you're a fan of like Annie Falconwrath, but you want to play Dimir, this is a good way to kind of simulate that playstyle in a Dimir deck. We also got Tivit, Seller of Secrets, one of my favorite new commanders from this release. 6 mana, 6/6 Sphinx Rogue with flying in Ward 3. It has Council's Dilemma, so when it enters a battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, everyone votes evidence or bribery. For every evidence vote, you get a clue token. For every bribery vote, you get a treasure token. So this means it comes into play, you are getting 4 treasures or clues. You can't control exactly which ones you're gonna get. However, you're actually getting 5 treasures or clues, because the most important line of text on Tivit is while voting, you can vote an additional time, which is super exciting. So it works with its own ability. You vote twice, each of your opponents votes once, so you're getting 5 treasures or clue tokens out of this. More importantly, this actually gives us a voting commander. We have all these old voting cards from like Battle Bond, which are really, really cool. Magister of Worth and Capital Punishment, Plea of Power, Illusion of Choice, Expropriate. And we've seen some of these cards show up in Commander and just be played fairly in various decks, but we've never had a legend to tie them all together. Now we actually have a leader for voting Tribal Commander, and I'm super excited to build the deck. A little disappointed that it probably means Expropriate's going to be played more, but I think it's really cool that we finally have a leader for the voting commander deck. And I'll also say, if you think you're going to build this deck, I would probably run out and get these cards soon, because I would not be surprised to see the prices of some of these voting cards increasing because of Tivit. We also got, in the world of non-legendary creatures, a pretty interesting escape card in Skyway Robber. So a flying hill giant in blue, but it has escape for 4 mana and 5 cards, and then it escapes with, when it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell from among the exiled cards with Skyway Robber without paying its mana cost. So this seems like a cool addition to graveyard decks. It's built to work work with connive, obviously. So if you're playing connive stuff, easy way to get this in your graveyard, get other cards in the graveyard, escape it, get the value out of it. But it would also be good in Madroltha or Slogger or Sidisi, any graveyard-based commander deck. And then you have the upside that this can be casting some really powerful stuff. Like worst case, it's like an Ophidian. You're getting an extra card out of it. Best case, you're getting something huge. You can be casting an Emergent Ultimatum or something for free, a little restricted, only artifacts, instants, or sorceries, but still, it seems pretty easy to build your deck in a way where one hit with this is potentially just not literally winning you the game, but generating a huge amount of value. So really cool new graveyard card. We also got Misfortune Teller, new 4-mana 3/1 with Death Touch. It's a human warlock, and when it enters a battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile a card from a graveyard. If it was a creature, make a 2/2 black rogue. If it was a land, make a treasure. Otherwise, you gain 3 life. So Misfortune Teller doesn't seem that powerful to me. I mean, it's fine. It's 4 mana, adding 5 power. I think this is a card that I would only really be interested in playing in a blink deck. If you have a Panharmonicon out, an Aminatu, a Triad of Fate, some sort of blink way to reuse it, then it's pretty exciting. I do like that it can work as graveyard hate, sniper reanimation target or something, but in general, this one just feels a little bit below the curve to me. We also got Smuggler's Share. This is a card that has been really hyped, maybe the most hyped card out of this whole Commander release. 3-mana enchantment at the beginning of each end step. Draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn, then create a treasure for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control each turn. So Smuggler Share, mono white, card advantage / ramp, kind of compares to Phyrexian Arena, Smothering Tithe. The question is, how often are you going to be able to trigger this? If you think about what triggers it, your opponent drawing 2 cards a turn or having 2 lands enter the battlefield each turn, I feel like the card draw one should be pretty easy to hit. Like, people draw a lot of cards in Commander, so I think worst case, this is kind of going to be like a weird Phyrexian Arena. I would be surprised if, especially in the mid to late game, if you weren't at least getting 1 card out of this every time around the table. The treasure mode, I think that's more of a bonus. Like, in theory, you can get it off fetch lands or whatever, but I'm not sure how often that'll come up. I'm a little worried that Monologue Tax was kind of hype and is mostly fizzled, but I think this Smuggler's Share is way better than Monologue Tax. The card draw mode just seems so easy to hit. I think, though, as I mentioned before, the treasure mode might be a little bit infrequent. If you can get it down early against a green player with Rampant Groves and Cultivates, then you're probably going to be fine, because people are still going to ramp. They're not going to not cast their ramp spells. Although fetch lands, it seems easy enough to play around this. You can wait and crack the fetch land on your opponent's turn. I guess if you need the mana right away, you might still do it, but it's pretty easy to play around with fetch lands. So Smuggler Share, I think this can end up a new white staple just because of that card draw mode. I really think this should be like the white Phyrexian Arena. Yes, it's a little risky. Yes, it does depend on your opponents, but I think it's going to happen often enough to make it worth it. And then once in a while, you might get some treasures as a bonus, and you can even build around it. Like, you can make sure your opponents are drawing 2 cards each turn with Howling Mine. Like, if you play a Howling Mine, each opponent's going to draw an extra card each turn, but you're going to draw an extra card each turn as well, so you benefit way more. Or Gaia Reach Sanitarium to make each player loot. That's going to make sure someone's drawing 2 cards in their card turn because they draw for their upkeep. So if you want to build around it, it can get even better. But even without doing that, I think this is just the white Phyrexian Arena and going to be very good. We also got Lethal Scheming, some new removal, 4-mana instant, Convoke though, so you can cast it on the cheap by tapping creatures, and you destroy target creature or planeswalker. Each creature that convoked Lethal Schemes connive, so you get to loot and grow your creatures. Seems like a fine removal spell in decks that either are going wide, like token decks like Thales or Izona, where you're probably going to be able to cast this for free and like tap 4 tokens and quadruple loot, or in graveyard decks where you just actively care about filling your graveyard, Nethroi or Rafine or Old Stick Fingers. So if you care about one of those things, I think this is probably worth including in your removal package, especially since Convoke can often make it free. On the other hand, if you don't care about those things and you're not going wide, or you don't especially care about filling your graveyard, I'd probably just play another option. We also got Mask of the Schemer, a new 3-mana equipment. This is whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, it connives X, where X is the amount of damage that was dealt to that player. So you're going to draw X cards, discard X cards, maybe put a bunch of counters on it. So it does kind of snowball with itself. You get in the first hit, then you get counters from connive to make it bigger, to connive more the next time, equip of 2. So this calls back to Mask of Memory, sort of a very good and maybe even underrated equipment. A little bit like Mask of Grizzlebrand, except you don't got to sacrifice stuff and you don't got to pay life. Is Mask of the Schemer good? I think it's okay. I think it is strong, although it is more expensive than Mask of Memory, and it does need blue mana, which limits some of its homes, but this is a pretty repeatable way to draw cards. The problem is, it's blue, and blue's already really good at drawing cards. The power of something like Mask of Memory, it's something you can play in like your white equipment deck or Boros equipment deck that isn't as good at drawing cards, so we'll have to see. If you're in a blue equipment deck, I think this is in the conversation, although I expect it's probably going to be more mid-power rather than a staple. We also got Life Insurance, which is a pretty interesting enchantment. 5 mana Orzhov enchantment, has Extort, and says when a non-token creature dies, you lose a life and make a treasure token. So the reason Life Insurance is exciting, well, first, it can make a ton of mana. You just play this, wrath the board, lose a bunch of life, make a bunch of treasures, that's sweet. But this is essentially Pitiless Plunder on an enchantment. The downside, of course, is you're going to lose life, which is a problem, but there are some Pitiless Plunder combos that this is going to fit right into. The easiest Pitiless Plunder combos, like a sack outlet like Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, along with the Resembling Skeleton, and then something like Blood Artist, which you'll get around the loss of life, so you're not really going to care about that. So if you're trying to combo off, this is just another Pitiless Plunder. It's just going to give you some redundancy with that combo. So what you do is essentially like sack your Resembling Skeleton to Ashnod's Altar. You're also going to get the treasure that can pay the black mana along with the Ashnod Altar mana to get back Resembling Skeleton, do it again and again and again, which is infinite Blood Artist triggers or whatever death trigger, ETB trigger thing you're using to win the game. So it seems perfect for aristocrat style decks. You can just slot this into Tisa Karlov, Elenda, Aetherios, that style of deck, and probably get value out of it and have the upside of maybe going infinite with it as a way to win the game. We also got some weird white reanimation in Jailbreak. 2 mana sorcery, return target permanent card in an opponent's graveyard to the battlefield under their control, and then when that permanent enters the battlefield, return up to 1 target permanent with equal or less a mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is 2 mana reanimation for any permanent, except you also gotta give your opponent a permanent that is as much mana. So if this was a black card, it probably wouldn't be that exciting. Black has tons of sweet, cheap reanimation, but white doesn't. White reanimation is pretty expensive, and especially when you consider the flexibility of hitting any permanent rather than just creatures, I think this card is pretty powerful. We've seen like Secret Rendezvous. Yes, it benefits your opponent as much as it benefits you, but it's ended up being a pretty good commander card because you can manipulate it to your advantage. I think that Jailbreak can do something similar. Like if you look at Obsidat's Age, that's 5 mana in 2 colors to essentially do the same thing. So especially if you are like a non-black creature reanimation deck, or even better, maybe you're some sort of permanent reanimation deck like Suzuki the Living Lore, Saga Reanimator, then I think that Jailbreak is actually a pretty sweet option. So in traditional Reanimator, if you got black mana, I think you stick with your normal black reanimation spells, but this opens up some interesting possibilities and color combinations that just don't have a ton of support for this playstyle, this Reanimator playstyle. We also got In Too Deep, a 2 mana aura with split second, so no one can do anything while it's on the stack. It enchants a creature, planeswalker, or clue for some reason. An enchanted permanent becomes a colorless clue with pay to sack it, draw a card, loses all other abilities. It's basically like an Imprison on the moon, with the upside of split second and being cheaper, but the downside that it's not as good against commanders, because your opponent can always sacrifice their clue commanders. One of the upside of Imprison in the Moon is you can get rid of a commander forever, at least until your opponent can kill the Imprisoned in the Moon. But I still think this is certainly good enough to be part of Blue's removal suite, considering that Blue just isn't very good at removing things, especially if you're mono blue. We also got Aerial Extortionist, which is a pretty interesting card. 5 mana 4/3 bird soldier with flying. When it enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent for as long as that card remains exiled. Its owner may cast it, and then whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere but their hand, draw a card. So on level 1, Aerial Extortionist temporarily gets rid of something, and when whoever's thing you exiled replays it, you get to draw a card. Also, in the dark, this is always going to hit on commanders. We're playing commander, everyone's casting commanders from their command zone, so whenever a opponent casts a commander, you're going to get to draw a card. Is that enough to make Aerial Extortionist work? I'm on the fence. Like, it is going to generate value, but it is 5 mana. On the other hand, this is going to be insane in some matchups. If you have a Prosper player in your play group, this is going to be an all-star, because Prosper is all about casting cards from exile. That's all that Prosper wants to do. Aerial Extortionist is going to draw you a ridiculous amount of cards. If you're up against a Prosper deck and you can keep it on the battlefield, there's also flashback decks, decks casting escape cards from the graveyard. So think about your play group. If you're in a play group where people are prospering or casting things from non-hand places, then this goes way up in value and can be an all-star. You could also build around it, like Ubamask, for example, or New Urabrosk. Essentially makes your opponent cast spells from exile. Ubamask is the hardest lock. It just makes every draw turn into exile, and players can play the cards that are exiled with it. Aerial Extortionist would essentially draw you a card for every spell an opponent casts. Once you get Ubamask on the battlefield, finally, you can also just use it on your stuff. Like, you can exile your Wall of Omens or Spirited Companion, recast it, reuse the Enter as a battlefield trigger. Often going to be better to hit your opponent's stuff, most likely, but it is worth keeping in mind there probably will be scenarios when that's correct. So Aerial Extortionist, I like this card. I'm right on the fence as to whether I just throw this in a random white deck just to draw off commanders and off its own ability. But I think if you're in a Prosper play group or another style of play group where people are casting spells from non-hand places, then this card is an auto-include and very strong. We also got Change of Plans. 2 mana X, blue instant. Each of X target creatures you control connive, and you may have any number of them phase out. So this is kind of like a new take on March of Swirling Mist. Downside is you can't hit your opponent's stuff. Upside is you get to connive a bunch, which is really nice, a bunch of looting. And these cards have went way up in value recently thanks to Farewell. And now that people are playing Farewell, this exile-based Wrath, your old ways of protecting your creatures, your heroic interventions or whatever, your flawless maneuvers don't always get it done. Phasing your creatures out is a guaranteed way that you're going to survive a Farewell and any other Wrath in the format. See Teferi's protection. So I actually really like this card in current Commander, just because I feel like phasing out your stuff has gone way up in value. Plus, who's going to complain about conniving a bunch? We also got Currency Converter, 1 mana artifact. When you discard a card, you can exile it from your graveyard. You can pay 2 mana, tap it in loot, and you can tap it to put a card exiled with Currency Converter into your graveyard. If it's a land, you make a treasure. If it's a non-land, you make a 2/2 black rogue creature token. So this card, I think this is a card for specific decks. I think this has to be a card for leaves the graveyard decks. Quintorius cares about cards leaving your graveyard. Tormod cares about cards leaving your graveyard. It's kind of this weird take on Bag of Holding. It does something very similar to Bag of Holding, honestly. The difference is Currency Converter going to give you a little bit of value throughout the game. When Bag of Holding, you're basically holding up all those cards and hoping to get them back in your hand. I don't think I would just throw this in a random deck, although it is worth mentioning. It's a 1 mana artifact, so you can snag it with Urza Saga, and we've seen literally across formats, cards that can be tutored up with Urza Saga go way up in value, so maybe that's enough. It does generate a little bit of value throughout the game. Who knows? Maybe even some legacy deck can find a use for it thanks to Urza Saga. We also got Cephalid Face Digger, 3 mana 1/4 Cephalid Rogue. It can't be blocked, and in the beginning combat on your turn, you may have Cephalid Face Digger become a copy of another target creature until end of turn, except it's a 1/4 and has this creature can't be blocked. This card reminds me a lot of Mindlink Mech. We've played a lot of Mindlink Mech recently, and Mindlink Mech is so sweet. Being able to copy a creature but get an evasive version of it is actually really powerful with Cephalid Constables or Ophidians or Free Flame Planers or Nashi, and I think that Cephalid Face Digger can do something similar. Of course, it's still only 1 power, so you're not going to get to bounce all your stuff with Constable or whatever. This is a way you can like guarantee a hit with a Nashi. Sure, you're going to Legend Rule yourself, but you can figure out a way around that. This is a way you can guarantee you're going to get in with an Efreet Flame Painter or an Ophidian to draw a card. So there's certainly a lot of uses for this card, and I really like it. I really like this style of effect, where if you build around it and play the right cards, it can be really strong. The other use of this card, I think, is just play it in Rogues. It is a pretty good Rogue. It works with what Rogues wants, which is evasive creatures, so Anawan, Zerasan, decks like that definitely gonna want it. Finally today, we got our Obscura Confluence, our Esper Confluence, 4 mana instant. Choose 3, can choose the same mode more than once. Until end of turn, target creature loses all abilities and has base power and toughness of 1/1. Target creature connives, target player returns a creature card card from their graveyard to their hand. So essentially you get 3 turn to fogs / loots with upside / raised deads. And I think this card's pretty reasonable. Being instant is a really big deal. And the instant speed turn to frog mode can lead to some huge blowouts. You can wait until after combat, after blocks are declared, and shrink 3 of your opponent's big creatures so they lose all their abilities and become 1/1s and die in combat. So this can easily be a 3-for-1. So I think that's the mode I'm most interested in, is this triple turn to frog. Worst case, you can do some looting. And there is some synergy here where if you're a connive deck, you're going to be looting a lot, getting cards in the graveyard, and then the raised dead goes up in value. So again, like all of these confluences, no specific mode is like super efficient for its mana value. If you look at these effects, they're probably all 1-ish mana. I guess turn to frog is literally 2 mana, but still, they're all pretty low mana value effects. But this flexibility is really nice, especially considering how much of a blowout the triple turn to frog can be. So I think if you're playing some sort of graveyard deck, Rafine, Verena, Sephiroth, I would definitely consider including this in my deck. If you can't really get value out of the looting mode, the connive mode, and the raised dead mode, then it goes down in value, but I still think the triple turn to frog mode is pretty interesting. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our Esper deck. So what do you think? How hyped are you for this deck? What's your favorite card from the deck? Let me know in the comments, and I'll be back one more time in the near future to talk about the Naya deck. So until then, everyone, have a great afternoon, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.